Logistics.
There it is, and it's going up. So, hey, everybody, welcome to the Sustainiacs. I'm Michael Vincent. I'm always the Sustainiac. My guests are usually always Sustainiacs as well, but guests on the show, first time, Rachel Sheila Khan. Did I get that right?
That's right.
I did get that.
Said in the northern way.
Yes, said in a way that only a person from Cleveland, Ohio, who lives in Chattanooga, Tennessee, can say it, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And it says here, fashion circularity specialist. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. And I'm also something called an ecosystem architect. Because I realized that when I started to work in circularity, so much of it was about systems, right? And it was like, actually, a lot of the work is going to be about how we bring people together, how we bring businesses together to co-create this future, right? So this is the ecosystem architect side of things.
So you're an ecosystem architect.
Yeah.
I like that. It doesn't say that on it. Oh, no, it does.
It does.
Real circularity and ecosystem architect at the ecosystem incubator.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in the world. And I love you.
There's a lot going on in your world.
Yeah. I love it. You have to kind of be into a lot of things with this work, right? Like systems, people, collaboration. Like we can zoom right into like a fiber, a textile, a button, and then zoom right out and see that how that fits into the rest of the industry and how the industry fits into other industries, etc. So much, you have to be into so much science, creativity as well. I think creativity is a huge part of it.
Well, it is a huge part of it because this is something that hasn't been done before, right? I mean, not intentionally, but specifically designed out of our previous
systems,
fashion industry or parts industry, automotive industry. It doesn't matter what industry it is. Circularity was specifically designed out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't throw a dart and say, let's get rid of circularity, but it was not efficient. Extract, use, toss was most efficient, right? So it was specifically taken out.
It was most economically viable, I think, because...
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Efficiency at all costs, right?
Yeah, because it was like the planned obsolescence of items and the way that the world works is to create as much stuff as we possibly can, make sure it runs out of its use cycle and there's no way to repair it or do anything with it. So the economy relies on this planned obsolescence, this continual creation of stuff for creation of stuff's sake, and therefore that's the mess that we're in. So
yeah, it can be, exactly. And there's no better time of the year right now than to reflect on these things, right? Because it is always that division of commercialized Christmas, right, or commercialized holiday season versus what has been kind of the anti-fun sentiment of that's not why we celebrate. Right?
Yeah,
it's like if you say that, then you're like the Scrooge or something like that, when in reality it's the exact opposite.
Not at all. I think there's different joys to be shared at Christmas. Like I make my boys, I've got two young boys, well, 9 and 12, right? I make
fantastic. Same age as my girls.
Fabulous. I make them experience boxes. So instead of having stuff, right, which they just essentially place away and forget exists, I give them experiences. So movie nights, like a box about movie nights with popcorn and things like that, and a box that's like go and have an owl experience and things like that. So they can experience that over the year rather than a real flash in the pan bit of toy that doesn't last past about 10 minutes. So
no, it really doesn't. It's like a week later I don't have any toys to play with.
right? And you're like,
Right.
and they've forgotten they exist at all and are back onto the PlayStation 5 or whatever. So,
Yeah, no, and that's exactly right. But I mean, and here's the thing, though. I was no different as a kid, right? I mean,
right.
you can't blame them. We can only try and guide them a better way than maybe we were, or try and teach them lessons that we ignored. Maybe a better way to say it, right?
Yeah, exactly. But they
But
still
that's not
went
why we're
straight
here.
on opening the boxes. They weren't, I thought, oh, they're going to be a bit depressed about this. But really, they were like, this is amazing. I've got loads of boxes to open. And it was the opening of the boxes that was more important for them. So,
That's exactly what it is. Like my wife, just she really, I mean, she cares about what she gets, right? But it is much more about, there could be 30 boxes out there, each with like $1 item or a
right.
£1 item, and she would love it more than just a big present, because she just loves the number of presents. She's truly a kid on Christmas is my. But that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about circular Earth, right? And talk about you and get some information from you. You're the co-founder of what is called Real Circularity, right?
Yeah, alongside a great man called Ken Alston. And Ken worked on the original, before circularity, the original circularity was cradle to cradle. And previous to that, there were other papers written on it. And he worked with them over about 30 years ago, and helped them implement a lot of the first iterations of what is now known as circularity. He is an absolute legend. I've learned loads by working with him, and we co-wrote a book. We've created an academy to help professionals to start implementing this in their work, because the reason it's called Real is that we wanted a place where people could come and actually action it, rather than just talking about abstract ideas and drawings and things like that, diagrams. An infographic is great. I love a good infographic, don't you? But actually,
Yeah.
the people that work with us actually want to start placing it into their work. And I, for one, started this work at the beginning because I was kind of like sick of hearing everyone sort of talking about how bad everything was. So I'm like, well, we actually want to do something about this, right? So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
so we
Yeah.
started
Physically do
that.
so. So it's is it a lab?
It's kind of a lab, I suppose. It's education, mainly, and also we do with our circular earth work, consultancies with businesses to help them to start iterating it. And that could be still coming in and doing education pieces for their staff, but it could be hands-on creating products, and systems, of business, because we essentially have to create both, right? Because reducing overproduction and creating a business out of something, that is less amount of stuff, is going to need the business system itself to change.
Well, you know what? 100%. I 100% agree. And I often argue that circularity actually is efficient business systems,
Yeah.
right? It's not, I would go a step further than, you don't just need it. It is. I mean, at its core, that's what it is, no matter what you're looking at, right? I mean, because efficient business takes out inefficiencies, which are waste, overproduction, et cetera, right?
Yeah, exactly. But we have to like look at they say in economic ways, right? Because we've been creating this exponential growth of stuff. And for some businesses, they're creating something that would be used and reused for a longer period of time. So we need to think of how they're going to create more value systems on that one product or that one idea or that one brand. So there could be other revenue streams and things like that. It really depends whether you're creating, I don't know, footwear, or you're creating something that's more frequently used, like socks, for instance, that kind of thing. It's got to be different in each scenario. But yeah, that's what we love. Like we love like the
Yeah.
complexities of the different systems, zooming into the very small detail, zooming out to the larger detail, and being able to sort of architect that together.
So is this so real circularity, is it something that businesses come to you and say, "Look, we're bringing in these sustainability initiatives, etc., and we need your help, kind of like defining that or finding the opportunities, or how does that initial engagement work?"
Depends where they're coming from, what size of business they are. A lot of them first come to us and say, what do I do with my waste? Right. So their first
Oh, okay. All
conversation
right.
is,
Yeah. No,
what do I do with my
that's a
waste?
good opener.
It's a good
Yeah.
opener, right? Like, and sometimes we look at what they can do with their waste right now, but more often than not, I'm then taking them back to, well, how can you design waste out of your system altogether, right? That's a step in the next conversation. But even if it's a conversation at first to figure out what to do with their waste creatively, okay, I'm game for that, right? We're game to create a relationship with that. In the way to then move into this next space, right? So, yeah, sometimes it's like that. Sometimes it's much more focused on, okay, how can I make a more compelling business?
Mm.
Especially for some of the smaller businesses that want to be more interesting. And circularity and systems can kind of set them apart, probably from the mainstream work as well,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah. Kind of from a marketing aspect or a stickiness to their
Yeah,
market.
no, just
Yeah.
something much more interesting, because I think people are very bored of seeing beige department stores now. Aren't you? So,
I agree. I agree.
and actually, there's much more interesting businesses that can be created that are not just about the product, but about what that product means to people. So some of it is about branding, positioning, creating new innovative ideas that are complementary to that business and brand as well, and that it's not just about flogging a bunch of jogging pants or something. It's actually, how can we embellish and make that brand much more interesting and compelling at the same time as bringing in circularity.
So right now, I mean, in the day and age that we live in the current, defined generations, whether you buy into that wholeheartedly or not, I mean, they bleed over, etc. But is that interesting thing? I mean, it changes throughout the years, right? As a society as a whole.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Making a company interesting 20 years ago isn't the same as making one interesting today,
definitely.
right?
It's definitely dynamic. And I'd say, our thoughts move with the times, move with what's happening. We have with our work something called the trend radar, which Ken actually brought into the work back in the day, but we've updated it and are following the most interesting trends that are coming up, and also the things that might sort of start biting businesses on the arse, like EPR and legislations that are coming up into the forefront, so that your business can be ready for anything that's coming your way. And that might be the things like the legislation piece, where you might get fined for being a linear company, especially in the EU at the moment. But it could be, AI is coming into place. In our summit on the 21st of December, we have someone who's been working in the VR space, right? To, do you even need some of these fashion items in the real world? Could it actually be virtual? And she wears these virtual earrings, like on the virtual calls and things like that. But she said that those earrings are like the most valuable piece item that she has in her wardrobe. She sees it as being a part of her actual wardrobe, even though
Oh wow.
they're not there in reality. Like, she can't go down to the shops and wear them. So there's a whole bunch of
No,
interesting
but if you're
stuff.
doing a lot of meetings on VR, like I could use that, right?
Yeah, yeah, you could totally wear her earrings. It'd suit you.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
But
because
even in that space though, I mean, they could be the only earrings in existence,
they
right? I mean,
are,
then
well, yeah, because you attach it to the blockchain or to a NFT or something like that, and you've got something completely unique that's completely your digital asset.
yeah,
Like,
people
a lot
could
of
say,
Gen
"Where'd you
Z
get
are
those
very
earrings?"
into
Well,
this.
they're costly, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
could sell you.
this will help a brand to be able to put in new and exciting ideas that link with their brand, but are not creating stuff for stuff's sake, right? Like, so, and Gen Z is like they love like creating in the virtual environment. Like they and you know my children as well who are, not, younger than Gen Zs, they want to express themselves in the virtual
Yes.
environment.
Well, I'll tell you, Rachel. So last night for probably an hour and a half, we have teams in my house. Okay,
Uh-huh.
it's and then we trade the girls. So my wife and my eldest, and then me and my youngest will compete, and then we'll switch up the teams. But it's never my wife and I together because we're not good enough at it.
You need to team
But
up with a younger one, yes.
yeah. But they play this game called Dress to Impress.
Uh-huh, I've seen this, I tried to use that. Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun, and they give you a topic, and you take your model, and you dress it up in this virtual, and then you have a virtual show, a fashion show, and people
That's
vote.
amazing.
It's fantastic, and so the one topic was dystopia, and last night, and uh, uh, my wife and two girls weren't sure what dystopia meant, so I didn't tell them.
Oh, interesting.
But I took my avatar and I didn't put a face on it. The skin color was just gray. I gave her darker gray hair and gray overalls and gray and like muted red boots.
Uh-huh.
And they're like, that is terrible. And I won.
Yeah, because you knew what
I said,
dystopia meant.
that's dystopia. Yeah, but I mean that's what we're talking about. I mean, this virtual things you can make your own stuff, and they're already doing this stuff, and like you say, the value because they'll come and say, "Oh, can I get some Robux, right? Or can I get
Yeah,
some this to buy these certain things in these virtual reality games?" And they're like real toys to them, you know?
exactly, it's a part of their life. It's a part of their lives. It's like, connected together, like, that I can kind of understand, but I'm not immersed in it like they are, right?
Right,
You
right.
know, so I think anyone wanting to, work with the young up and coming generations, brands have to be in this space. Gucci have done it for years. Like they've got a whole team like dedicated to virtual space. So we encourage businesses to look at this. Yeah, I mean, there's an issue with the servers right now because the servers, obviously, not all of them are green. They're using a lot of carbon emissions, etc., for powering them. But I think over time, once renewable energy kicks up, we will see that will become a way of expressing yourself in the fashion world without having to have physical things.
Yeah. That's a space that a lot of people don't understand just how difficult or what the changes are going to be needed to power all of AI, et cetera,
Yeah,
and these different, just how big these data centers are and just how much energy they consume, right?
yeah.
But there's ways to go around it. Like I was talking to a gentleman who was doing uh, this this farming, inside farming and vertical farming, et cetera, and you have we were joking about Bitcoin farms because
Mm,
to grow sustainably grow fruits and vegetables, etc., close to the consumption centers, right? So you're not shipping them from South America, or you're not shipping them, you have them being grown. So you do this internal, and there's a big carbon footprint with trying to do that in traditional energy means, right?
yeah.
But if you what they're working on in British Columbia is, or maybe it's Alberta, but in Canada is because you can imagine in Canada, northern Canada, growing tomatoes isn't the easiest thing to do.
No.
Right?
They're cold.
So, but what they're doing is using the heat and the energy off of um, data
So
center,
wow, very
right?
cool. Yeah,
Right, and then powering it with hydro power. So that now you can grab that circularity across industries, right?
and
Which
cross
is
industry is such a big part of what we do. Like, I'm
yeah,
constantly connecting with people in the energy space, in the built environment, in the ESG space, and the legislation space. Um, and it is so eye-opening when you start coming out of your own little niche, right, or your domain, right? A lot of my peers stay in one domain, and it's a lot about fibers, and that's great, right? It's wonderful, but we need to definitely connect up industries a lot more than we are doing.
Mm.
And also find the synergies with the other places.
Yeah, sure. Well, even if you just stay in the fiber space, right? You're talking about fashion and textiles, right? Textile fibers,
Yeah,
right? Is what we're talking about.
yeah, exactly.
Even if you stay in that, you find textile fibers in, oh, I don't know. I'm looking at my computer and I have a textile fiber coating on the cord that powers it.
Yeah,
So it'd be hard to find an industry where it's not used.
probably. Yeah. By the time you look at everything, there's probably some kind of textiles or fiber on it, right? And
Right.
everything is so nuanced in the fiber space. Um, you can't ever say this is inherently bad and that is inherently good. It de- the thing is, it depends where it's from, how it's grown, or how it's extracted, or where it's extracted from. And what's then placed on it. Such as processing
Yeah.
chemicals, etc. Then
Right.
dye stuffs and things like that. So it's so nuanced that you really have to do it with a sense of place placed on it. Okay, where has this exactly come from, and what has happened to it? What processing chemicals or things have been placed on it, and then what's happening with the chemical dyes, etc. It's because
Yeah.
you can't say that one thing is bad and another thing is good. It depends, right? There's a sliding scale of this. So
Well, there's a sliding scale, but there's also dangerous assumptions, right?
yes,
Natural versus synthetic. Natural's always better. Not necessarily the
not
case.
necessarily, and the same vice versa, right? Like, um,
Yes.
like you can still have um, uh, microfibers that come off of an organic material that go into the environment, and if they've coated with the toxic chemicals, then they're going to be just as bad as a microfiber, which everyone talks
Right.
about, right? So
Right.
it depends, and then you can't say, oh, cotton is really bad because it's a really thirsty crop. Well, it is if it's grown in a monoculture, right? If it's
Yeah.
grown in a regenerative culture, the soil actually retains the water because it's bioavailable. There's a lot more inhabitants in the soil,
Sure.
so it
Sure.
it actually keeps the water. So we work with a cooperative of regenerative cotton growers that grow in this style, right? Who have companion planting, would plant trees next to it, have animals and things on there as well, so that this rain, when the rain does come, the soil retains this water, so it can completely be rain fed, right? So
Right.
even in the regenerative cotton space, there'll be like a sliding scale in terms of what's happening in these
Yeah,
different
sure. Well,
localities.
and there's ways like precision farming works, right? I mean, there's people I've had on the show that they produce the systems, and they was really perfected out of Israel, was that delivers the exact right amount of moisture to the roots, exactly to the roots of the plant on specific schedules based on what plant that is, and reduces that flooding the field,
Exactly.
completely inefficient watering method, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think it really depends. You can't say cotton is bad and
No.
whatever, vice versa. It really depends, and it depends what you're using it for as well. Like
It does, and there was a recent study, perhaps you're familiar with it, where they studied earthworms, and they studied synthetic versus organic fibers in the soil, and they
wow,
found that the organic fibers were worse because they interact quicker. I mean, you put them in, you theoretically you make the organic or fibers so that they break down in the soil, and then the synthetic ones don't. Well, the synthetic ones don't, and then for the worms aren't ingesting them, but the other ones are, and then it kills their birth rate, their reproductive rate.
Interesting. Oh, I'd love to see that study. That sounds
Yeah,
fabulous.
I'll find the link to it and send it
Do
to you. There
find
was a
it.
mortality rate. There was like triple the mortality rate of earthworms with organic fibers. Now, they might have been specific organic fibers, but it's an
Yeah,
interesting, it's
and
exactly what we're talking about. You don't understand the unintended consequences, and just saying
100%.
organic does not necessarily mean better. We have
Yeah,
to
and then,
understand.
it still has to be designed to be placed back into a system as much as possible that is not necessarily composting. It might be, okay, let's make sure it's 100% monofiber so that it can be chopped up and remade into more fiber again, right? Instead of
100%,
putting it back
100%.
into it, that's the last thing that we want to do, the last resort, right? But it's okay for some things where we know we're not going to probably be able to reuse them or whatever, or put them back into a system. But for the vast majority of things, they can be designed to be placed back into a system. So
They can. So, but okay. So let's talk about that, and let's stay on the fiber thing. There's so many things that you have done that, I mean, you're going to miss your meeting in London
we
if
could
we
go
go.
on forever. Which is
Yeah,
why we
you
have a full 10-hour summit to talk about
you need to call Ken and say, hey, you're up. You got to go to the meeting.
this.
Um, but on the, so I mean, it doesn't have to stick with the fiber side, but that seems to be where you come from, where your base is
That's
from,
where I
right?
started, right?
Yeah,
Because
okay,
my domain was fashion. I was a designer for 2 decades and design manager, so I worked directly in the industry. Some designers
fantastic.
don't get to see the mills or or the fields particularly, but I was thrown in straight away. Like, go to Turkey and go to the manufacturers and learn about this stuff, right?
Yeah,
And it was the best education was to just get stuck in there and really see how things are made. It made me a better designer to understand how the fibers were woven or knitted together, how you printed on top of it, or how you put the dyes on top of it, etc., etc. So it,
yeah.
it,
Well, that's
it
that,
was
and that's
part
what I
of
want to kind
my
of get into now
beginning.
is that design, that system is that not the key to all of this?
Yeah,
Is the design? The design is the starting point, right?
yeah. The design, I'd say yes. It still needs to work hand in hand with an intention on the business that want to actually start working in new ways, or new old ways, right?
Right. Well, I
Um,
mean, it's hard to make sustainable clothing and textiles that don't look like my shirt, though.
yeah.
I mean, once you get much out of like this kind of color, you out of luck, right? As far as using it again, and I mean that's what I get. You know, the fast fashion industry and the shinier new. How do we get around that type of stuff in textile? Because textile is actually you're in if you're in textile recycling and circularity, that's arguably more difficult than the myriad of different types of polymers we're
Oh
trying to
god, yeah.
recycle in the plastic industry, right?
Because the fibers can be put together in a multitude of way in an infinite amount of ways, in a way,
Right.
right? So we're trying to keep away from the fibers being mixed from the technical and the natural cycle together, because it's very hard once you've created what Ken would call a monstrous hybrid. It's very hard to separate them again once you've woven them together, right? Or bonded them, sometimes in some cases bonded them together.
Yeah.
There are ways now with chemicals and processes to be able to take it into different types of fibers. Yeah, but again, there's issues with, okay, well, when you've got that fiber from that post-consumer outlet, what's happening with the toxins that might be present in these items, etc., going forward. So yeah,
Yeah, or even from the process of recycling them itself, right?
yeah, the process of recycling itself could. Yeah, most of the stuff from a UK high street, for instance, would be under some kind of compliance in terms of chemicals.
Yeah, sure.
Compliance
But
with,
those are items you need to consider, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
I'm sure
There's elements you need
there's
to
ways to
consider.
easily do it, but it's not good.
we call it tracking toxins to make sure that whatever is coming back into system is not harmful to humans, the environment, animal life, sea life. There's many considerations to be taken under for those parts as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, going back to like, is it the designer that chooses this? Yes, it is, but the designer is choosing what to do based on a set of um, sort of intentions from a business point of view, right? Like,
Right.
okay, you need to keep it under this cost. We need to make X amount of them, right? There are limitations whether you're a large business or a very tiny business on, say, minimum order quantities. For instance, when you're a tiny business, you can't always choose the most sustainable option or the most next gen material, etc., because you're restricted in terms of how the volume that you're creating. The system is set up to volume, etc. And then when
Mm,
you're a super large business, you are kind of you're trying to access this in different ways in terms of reducing the cost in terms of per meter or whatever you're doing, and making the best choice there in terms of, okay, I can commit to, I don't know, 100,000 meters or units or whatever of something, but then how am I going to get that back into a system? How am I going to put this into work based on these economic considerations as well? So,
yeah. Well, it's
um,
also consumer demand, right? I mean, what can you sell to the consumer?
yeah, at the end of the day, and a lot of places say this, whether you're in the fashion space or the ESG space, is that we need the demand for this now, right? That the customer, or we'd call them the user,
Right.
needs to be present to be able to help us do more good work. So
Well, they do, and that makes it that and that completes. Well, I don't know if it completes the circle, but there's the circle is there, and by definition, it's really hard to start, right? Unless you're at the top of a hill and you can physically roll it down, it's really difficult to start on that circle. Um, so it seems like that's where we're at right now. We're developing a whole lot of technologies, right? I mean, it's in and really across different types of materials for not just textiles, but a lot of nascent technologies and promising technologies, right? But
yeah,
the infrastructure to grab them and the demand to and the willingness to, one, demand that product, but two, responsibly handle it and enter it back into the circle
yeah,
is really a difficult part of it too. And it seems like they almost have to happen simultaneously.
yeah. It does. It has to happen, continuously. This is why we architect the things, because we're like, well, could we get this player to work with this player, or this
Yeah.
group of businesses to actually come together to make the systems work? They're generally all using similar fabrications, right? So both on the procurement and on the downstream, they could actually start working together. And we started facilitating this with small, tiny businesses just to test the models first to see if just these small businesses could start to come together and co-create.
Mm,
And
mm,
we had some really great examples of co-creating businesses and brands. Um, and we'd started to even have conversations about collaborating on these MOQs, the problems that these small businesses were having, trying to get into some of the larger mills, or the larger trim suppliers and things like that. And we'd actually started to have really great conversations. The mills and the suppliers were very happy to work with a group of micro businesses, for instance. So we were quite pleased with the results, even if we hadn't taken it into full circle as of yet.
yeah.
There's definite promise that these collaborations can go forward, and in a larger way as well, right? It just needs someone to come and work on positioning it with the businesses.
Yeah, no, building those coalitions is really important, and I'm assuming that it's I talked to Jane Abernethy, and she is the CSO, sustainability for Human Scale, which is
Mm-hmm.
large, manufacturer of furniture, office furniture,
Okay.
office
Yeah.
chairs. So, but what you're just, and she came from the design side too,
Yeah.
right? Which seems to be a well-educated design uh, professional seems to be, as I look and talk to people, that seems to be the key intelligence to grab for this type of position, or to have input from that. Until you need that intelligence bandwidth is hugely important in bringing sustainability into your manufacturing,
I think so.
regardless of what it is.
It's an interesting skill set, right? Because I was a design manager for 10 of the years, and a lot of it is systems and structures and how you like layer businesses together and how you work on timelines,
Right,
how you drop it down. I was working with 5 or 6 different brand names at the same time trying to figure this all out. It takes a systems thinker to be able to do that in a way, right? So I think designers, and specifically anyone who's managed design, can actually, it's almost like a project management role, right? A lot of it,
yeah,
even though
no,
it's
when most people hear design, they think of somebody makes a cool sketch and somebody else
yeah,
goes
yeah,
and builds it.
exactly. Which
But
is,
in there,
what you do when you first start, but
yeah,
eventually, when you get into the next part, you are kind of managing teams of designers and techs and marketing teams and teams in multiple locations all simultaneously at the same time. Like it's mental, but it
yeah,
really stood me in good stead for this new way of thinking of how, and also knowing the depth of the supply chain of the industry as it is and how we could actually start to adjust it.
right.
It really interesting to work with.
So
We also want to know all the science stuff. That's really important. Um, yeah, that's there, but it will take pragmatic application now with more of a design manager, a stroke, project leader sort of mindset. Doesn't sound as sexy as an architect, but it is.
yeah,
It is.
no, but I mean, it is a systems architect, and now you're cross industry team building to add to your skill set in this day and age to create this circularity, because you can't go to a textile uh like you said, when you were in Turkey, you can't go back to those vendors and just say, hey, just this one business wants this type of material now, so you need to change for just this one.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
doesn't work.
It doesn't work in silos, this work, right? And
Right.
very much a lot of businesses still even operate inside of their business in silos as well, right? Like,
Sure.
let alone like, how you actually architect with your suppliers and other, what would be seen as competitors back in the day, right? Now we
Yeah.
need an element of what Ken likes to call co-opetition. Like we're competitors, but we're cooperating at the same time because we know that
Yeah.
that will lead to a lot more win-win-wins, right? So that's where we want to focus much more energy on, especially going into 2025, because we see a big appetite for it, especially from the manufacturing base. We've actually had more people from the manufacturing base come to us and say, could you work with our ecosystem? Because they would call their factory thing an ecosystem. They're not generally just one factory. They're a set of factories, or a set of factories that are linked to mills and linked eventually to the fields, which creates way more transparency if I'm working with a factory ecosystem rather than top down from the brand level, if you see what I mean.
Mm.
Like, so
Yes, absolutely.
that's where we want to kind of work on with both ends, right, of the supply chain. And I really don't think that the supply should be called supply anymore, right? They're essentially partners in building these new systems, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In fair trade, one of our ecosystem members, she's been in fair trade for 15 years. She's only ever been in fair trade, and she said to me, "This is quite normal in the fair trade industry, that you would see any kind of artisan that you're working with, or mill base or whatever, as a partner, rather than, oh, that's just my supplier. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. I mean, and that's what you're saying. You're working at both ends. You're bending them into a circle. Is what you're doing. That's it. I mean, it all makes complete
Coaxing, I
sense.
say coaxing into a circle. you know
Coaxing, yes,
it,
coaxing
it
into
takes a lot
towards.
of relatability. It takes a lot of networking and knowing people and partnerships and connections. This stuff takes a long time, I think. Like we said,
Oh yeah, yeah, oh
Ken's been
yeah, for
working on
sure.
this for 36 years, right? And um he's still so positive. It's so great to see.
Well, and I don't think he's crazy for being, positive about it. It just takes a long time. You're changing a whole system, and people are changing. They're listening. They're seeing it, and the more you can prove and show people that it's not really a cost drain. It doesn't have to be a reduction in the ability for that company to return value to its shareholders or stakeholders. It can actually improve those
Yeah.
if it's done correctly, and improve in the true or the original sense of the word sustainability. Improve the sustainability of your supply chain, because now it's a partnership circle, and therefore your company, right?
Exactly, and I know all of the suppliers are more happy if they know they're going to get the orders, if they know they're going to be like, okay, we're working with these brands and businesses, or these set of brands and businesses. They generally have already that going on, but there's a worry that if they're not competitive, say on price in the usual linear fast fashion economy, they'd be scared of not being competitive on price, and companies just moving in whole entire countries and things like that. But if you've
Yeah.
got a workability with those businesses, you're going to be able to create this kind of future more in a more compelling way than you can if you're a business sort of jumping to different places to try and get the cheapest price, in the race to the bottom. So
Yeah, exactly. The race to the bottom. That's exactly right. Um, so let's talk a little bit, because when I stalk you on the internet, um, and I look at I look at your experiences, none of them seem to end, right? So I mean, style yourself sustainable, self-employed, through still doing it, associate
it's
lecturer
still up
in
there. Oh
sustainable.
god, that should be stopped now. So
Oh, okay. Well, all right. Well, let's.
that's
You've
what I
got
first
you.
started with, was style yourself sustainable, right? Like it
Oh,
was
okay.
it was an event series. And I'm so glad that I started with it, because it gave me the opportunity to network and to be in this space. I'd understood about the problems in the world before this time, and used to go to these events and as a designer and sit there and go, what can I do? I'm just a designer. I was kind of waiting for the CEOs to see these things that were coming through, and nothing happened. um, and it actually took my mother passing away for me to go, do you know what, actually I can do something and be something in this space.
Oh, wow.
And I since then I just wholeheartedly just went into it, and Style Yourself was the first part. And we did like an event, literally, that would just help customers understand what they could do right now, right here. In this moment, they could upcycle. We had people upcycling. We had like the sharing economy at the time, someone who did swapping and things like that.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
had
yeah.
rental. We had like vintage and pre-loved, but we also had a whole bunch of really cool eco brands that were in space. We did talks so that literally you could come into our event and you could have no money and you could still be sustainable, right? So we wanted to make it accessible. And essentially that's what we brought into all of the B2B experiences as well, that this can be accessible whether you're a first startup or whether you're, a large, massive business.
And that's, you hit on something that if it is to be, if you're going to get people to do it, you've got to show them how it's accessible to do it,
Yeah.
right? Because most of the people that I see, well, I mean, when you see the different studies of consumers, right, of the users, the people, everybody, a high majority, 70s to 80% is really kind, or high 80s and even low 90s is the percentage that you see across the different generations when they break it down, right? As to who wants to be sustainable.
Mm.
But then when they go to be sustainable, it's a very small fraction that actually do it. And that's because they don't understand how,
Now. Yeah.
right? The accessibility to being sustainable
Yeah.
is where it falls down. Yeah, I'd love to do it, but it can't be inconvenient. It can't cost me more money. It can't hurt my business, right? There's your education part right there. And isn't marketing responsible for that?
Um. Well,
Okay, look, responsibility might be a wrong thing, but aren't they the right tool to help change that?
potentially, yeah. I mean, there's obviously a lot to do in the business modeling to make sure that you have the right product, the right price, the right the right way of putting it back into system. But yeah, marketing is a huge tool really to be able to help people access it, and to tell people what to do next with the item as well, right? Like the marketing and the communication shouldn't stop when we've sold the item. It should continue, and actually that creates like regenerative income because you're having more communications with those customers, right?
Yeah, and it brings a sticky market for your right
Exactly,
for
right? Like if you're linking out going, "Oh, hey, we've got a really cool patch or something to add to your thing," or, "Here's our natural dye kits. Go and dye your things and renew them," and da, da, and this kind of thing. You're keeping in contact with your customer base. But also when the item comes to the end of its life, the customer needs to know what to do, where to send it, whether that's back to yourself or to a partner who would, chop it up and turn it into something else, or whatever that is. Because I think that's the issue, is we're so used to linear economy that it's just easier to throw it away than it is to try and figure out how to go back into a system. But we also need to make that item is valued enough for people to want to do that, right? That it's valued in their heart, so it's valued, the way that it's designed has more intrinsic value than the items that we're creating now, like the Christmas presents, right? A lot of it, I call
yeah.
it tut. I don't know whether you have that name in
What do you call it?
tut, like rubbish.
Okay.
It's like a lot of the stuff out there is not designed in an optimal way. It's just designed to, eventually just go into a landfill. There's no
Yeah, it's designed
designing it back into a
it's,
system.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's designed to get you to pay money and then throw it away and buy another one.
Exactly, and there's no value in it,
Yeah.
right?
No, there
Because
isn't.
it's not been
Yeah.
designed into it in the first place, right? So when
Well,
we're
that's fast
designing a
fashion as
business.
well, right? I mean, that's what they mean by saying fast fashion as well, right? I mean, it's
Yeah, fast
cool for right
fashion,
now, but
exactly the same.
boom.
And there's some people that say, well, we could create, we can create a fast product. And there's a wonderful woman who's done a PhD on using milk fibers, which were fibers that were used in, the wartime, because you couldn't get fibers, or something happened during wartime that fibers became scarce. So they created milk fibers. The original milk
Milk.
fiber, milk from actual milk.
Wow, I've never heard
Yeah.
of milk fibers. That's
Well, apparently
interesting.
the original milk fibers used formaldehyde, which probably is not a good idea.
That's a bad idea.
But
Gotcha.
she actually created a fiber without formaldehyde, fully from this milk, and turned it into a fiber, right? She said because it's from a waste, sort of a waste source, you could actually take this and turn it into a fully milk item, like with fully milk buttons and everything like this, right? And that essentially would be able to go back into a system straight away. It would be, fully regenerative.
What?
Yeah, there's so much so because of the way it's procured and created. She's only done this at lab stage, but it could be a fast fashion item. Like something
Because it's not going to
you get
last very
once
long, right?
and it goes away and it's fine. So
But that's what you need. That's the out of the box that you need, right?
yeah, so if
Thinking.
there is people that still want to have that flamboyance, and I'd say, that having fast fashion is quite a flamboyant thing to do.
Sure it
Um,
is.
so if you wanted that, then you could access it as well, right? She always says this is quite, it's quite interesting when people start talking about it with her. So
That is very
I'll
interesting.
send
That
you
is
her PhD papers. It's so interesting, really
I'd
fascinating
love to
woman.
talk to her about it. I'd
Yeah,
love an
yeah,
introduction if that's possible.
yeah.
That'd be fantastic. Talking about milk fibers and milk fat. Is that homogenized or is it
I have no idea.
pasteurized?
And then I'm like, I'm a vegan. What would I wear
Yeah,
clothes
right.
like that?
Now, what do you do if you're a vegan? Right. That's exactly it. Holy man.
Yeah,
That's well, you're not really. You're just borrowing it, right? So
yeah.
you're just borrowing the milk, so that should satisfy me, right? You can
I'm
borrow
just
it, can't
borrowing
you?
it, and it already exists. I don't know. It's true that
I don't
bit
know.
is
Yeah,
strange, So
we're not going to get into the philosophy of that.
no,
That's
because we could go on forever about it, like veganism in fashion and veganism as a whole, and that's a whole of a podcast. So
oh yeah, no, it certainly is. It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Yeah, that's crazy.
right, so we have different levels. The incubator is for the micro businesses. So generally, that is a one-person business or maybe 2-3 person business. They're brands, they're designers, they're techs, they're people who are growing fields of hemp in the UK.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
They work dynamically together on how they come together and co-create. So that's our micro business space. And then our larger businesses is more of our circular earth consultancy. And that can stem from sort of a small to medium sized business wanting to work on their business models or their newness, their sort of market differentiation. It can also include bodies, so working with bodies who are looking at papers and education tools and
Okay,
things like
gotcha.
that.
Yeah,
And it can include obviously the manufacturing base at the same time as
yeah,
well. So, and
gotcha.
we've also actually been approached by some companies who are doing tech as well, who want to have this knowledge of circularity placed into their tech systems, for instance. So that might be DPPs, digital product passports, things like that. That need this level of transparency and an understanding of what's next in a system to place into their tech as well. So yeah,
That's
there's
really
no
interesting.
like it's just this or it's just that. We're quite open and dynamic to many different applications of this. And cool thing is they all start coming together then, right? Because if there's a tech system that we've been involved in, we're more likely to say to our brands or the brands that we're working with, well, hey, actually, this would fit really well with what you're with what you're doing or your focus, etc., that kind of thing. So
Yeah, so it's a fantastic networking system as well,
yeah, yeah,
right? Just circularity as a whole in obviously in North America, specifically in the United States, is behind most of the major markets,
yeah.
right? And it's because they don't have to do it, right?
There's that piece.
And
Yeah,
I mean that's part of it, but they are more and more have to if they're going to survive an international market, right?
100%. If they're selling into the EU, for instance, anyone selling into EU really has to be aware of this, and we see it as a great nudge legislation because it will mean businesses in say North America or in the UK or whatever are not going to just make just circular product for the EU market on its own. It's going to nudge them to create it in its entirety. So for us, with our trend radar, we do it per business, right? We do have one that's generic, and we'll suggest generically what's happening, but we would help businesses to create their own trend radar of what's happening in their specific business, in their specific niche and category, and in their specific country or region, right? Because it will differ depending on where it is. Like there will still be EPR in the background that you've got to be aware of, especially if that business is going into the EU. So the trend radar is done quarterly with them to help them to be able to see not only just things that are going to bite them in the arse, but also new and upcoming exciting things that could make a more compelling offer for their business as well, right?
Yeah, it's not just a hey warning, it's an also opportunity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can't see it just as like a battleship thing. It's more of a like, no, this is an exciting trend that's coming forward in AI specifically that would really work for your business. And actually, this is how we could work with it. This is what we could create with this, and all of this sort of stuff. So we have to be very aware of what's happening in every aspect. And it's essentially what I did as a designer anyway, right? Like we were going out as designers, looking at the trends, and I'm far more trend aware than now than I was as a designer just looking at a catwalk silo. And I love every second of this work, right? That it's the best thing I've ever done in my entire life. It was also the hardest thing I've ever done, other than having children in my entire life. But it's just a joy to get up and work in this field every day.
Who needs to be reaching out to you, Rachel, and where do they do that?
Well, large fashion brands, medium fashion brands, small fashion brands, and anyone in between as well, right? Also professionals in the industry. If there are professionals that are interested, which we do get through our academy, who want to start to apply this, like I started thinking, how do I do that when I'm a designer? Find us at best one probably is rscan.com. That's my positioning website, and most all of the businesses are attached to that. So it's probably the best one to start with.
So it's rskan.com.
That's correct.